All right. Hello and welcome to the Parsha class, Parshat Re'eh 5785. And this is our new series, Taam, Dagan, on the rules of food and eating and halachot and hashkafot, etc., about the concepts of food that can be found in this week's Parsha. And this Parsha has a lot of the rules of meat and milk and kosher animals, species, lots to talk about. But even before we get to that, we'll see that there's quite a bit to say about food in the broader Parsha as well, all the way from the beginning of the Parsha as well, including the rules of tzedakah have something to do with food, and the sacrifices and avodah zarah. A lot of the concepts in the Parsha can teach us rules about food that are worth our time and concentration. So we'll start with the chapter 12, verse 6. If we are able to do everything I have planned, we'll have learned more psukim than usual. A few comments here and there, but I think we'll see that we have quite a bit to say on other concepts. So in Parshat Re'eh, I'm sharing instead of what I was going to share, the Sefaria page, which I did not really have time to really take care of. I see. Um, and well, instead of the Safari page, I'll just share my Word doc, my manuscript for the book I'm working on. So Parshat Re'eh, chapter 12, verse 6 says, V'haveitem shama, and you'll bring there, ulotechem zivchechem, your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, Bet masrotechem, your masrot, your tithes, your 10% gifts. Vet trumat yedchem, your truma, the offering of your hands. V'nidrechem, your whatever you made a neder for, whatever your sacrifices, whatever you vowed to bring. V'nidvotechem, anything you made a nedava for, any of your free will, again, things you promised to give, you didn't have to, but you wanted to. B'chorot b'karchem, the firstborn of your herds, v'tzonchem, and your flock. So all of that you're going to bring. This is talking about how we're going to be serving Hashem when we have the land. Must eat these, not just anywhere. It has to be eaten in a holy place in the temple area. So it says, excuse me. So says Ramban in his commentary, and we're learning right now in Mishnah Yomi in Zvachim how important that is, the intent even during the slaughter process. We'll talk about slaughtering the animals in just a moment. In the slaughtering process, also the Kohen or whoever's doing the slaughtering has to have in mind that this is going to be eaten in the right time and in the right place, and it has to be eaten in the temple area. So already we have concepts of food. It matters where you eat something, how you eat something, when you eat something. All of that is important for the process of indeed of the sacrifice. Chapter 12, verse 8, just two verses later, Lo ta'asun kechol asher anachnu osim po. You cannot do as we're doing here. Where's here? Moshe is talking to the Jews of the desert. So when they get to Israel, they're going to be doing things differently than how they're doing it now, whatever that means. Po hayom, nowadays. Ish kol hayasha be'inav. Everybody, a man, according to what's correct in his... oh, wow. Um, uh, I see what happened. Ow. Silly. Okay. Uh, so the verse says, "You shall not do like everything we do here today. Every man whatever is right in his own eyes." The commentary here says this is from Rav Samson Raphael Hirsch. The Jews were forbidden from eating animals that were fit to be shlamim offerings. So in the desert, things were different than how they're going to be in Israel. Those offerings are to be completely burnt up without human consumption. There's some offerings, including the basically the shlamim, which we call shlamim because we call them the peace offerings, but really they're more than that. They're shalim, in other words, they're completely burnt up, right? So in that sense, they're not eaten by people, and again, that's another restriction regarding food here in the beginning of the parsha, chapter 12, verse 11. Vayaha makom, and it's going to be that this place, Asher Yivchar Hashem Elokeichem. And by the way, this phrase is a very common phrase, especially in this parsha, that Hashem chooses this place. Your God, Hashem, your God will choose this place. In other words, the Beit HaMikdash, but it doesn't ever actually call it the Beit HaMikdash. It's one of those trivia questions that children get asked sometimes. How many times is the Beit HaMikdash mentioned in the Torah? Answer: 0. It's a trick question. The Beit HaMikdash is never mentioned. Certainly, its place is never mentioned. Yerushalayim is never mentioned because a number of reasons. Interestingly enough, the Ramban gives a reason that is very relevant to our situation nowadays. We have people fighting over Yerushalayim and Israel, very much so. But if we'd be fighting a lot more, even amongst each other, if we would have known from the time of Yeshua. Already in Yeshua, if you read the book of Yeshua, people are complaining, oh, that tribe got more land than us. Oh, we don't like this land or that land, whatever. Hashem chose what land you're going to get. Imagine if they knew then that where the Beit HaMikdash would be, right? That it would be in the land of Yehuda, on the border of, or crossing over already a little bit into the land of Binyamin. Then everybody would want that land, and then it would be disputed property. It would be very difficult. So that's one of the reasons why, according to the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, why it does not mention the place where the Beit HaMikdash would be. But anyway, that's what's being implied here, and we're going to see this phrase very, very often in this parsha, by the way. This again, Hamakom asher yivchar Hashem Elokeichem, the place that Hashem, your God, has chosen, right? Bo l'shaken shemo, Sham, to place His name. Shama teviu, there you will bring. There you will go, and bring et kol asher anochi mitzveh etchem, everything that I command you to bring. Olotechem, zivchechem, masrotechem, trumat yedchem. Same phrase we had before. V'chol mivchar nidrechem asher tidru lashem. That we have. That we have this idea that that everything, all these sacrifices, they can't just be brought wherever. You can't just make a sacrifice in your backyard on your barbecue grill. You have to bring it to the Beit HaMikdash. So not only that, but according to Rashi, bringing from the Gemara in Tamura 5a, not if you are going to bring something, you can't just bring anything. You promised to bring a cow. Which cow are you going to bring? The one that's on its left, on its last foot? No, you have to bring the best of the highest quality of what we said. Now, this connects to a lot of other concepts throughout the Torah in general, and this is part of the reason for our very first crime in human history, right? When Cain killed Hevel, is because Cain brought a sacrifice to Hashem of the lowest quality stuff that he had, the dregs, the the motes. How do you say the leftovers of his grain is what he brought. Hashem didn't want that. Hashem wanted the best quality, and we'll hear more about this, God willing, when we get to Bereshit after Simchat Torah, God willing. But that's kind of the idea, that you want to bring the best of what you have. That comes from this idea here as well. It says that Hashem commands us to bring from our hands the choicest, all your choice, like the best, right? That's why it says that phrase, "V'chol mivchar nidrechem," right? Hashem wants us to bring the very best of what we have. Mivchar nidrechem. That's what Rashi says. Hashem wants us to bring our best quality stuff. All right, let's keep going a little bit further. More about this concept of what we're going to bring to the Beit HaMikdash. Ki im b'makom asher yivchar Hashem, again that phrase, in that place that Hashem chose, be'echad shivatecha, in one of your tribes. Obviously, it's not gonna be. You can't have the Beit HaMikdash everywhere. You can't have the whole Israel be the Beit HaMikdash, right? One of the tribes is going to be there. Tale olotecha, over there you're going to bring your burnt offerings, the olah, v'sham taseh, and there you're going to do it. Kol asher anochi mitzaveka, everything that I command you. And Rashi says, atome ve'atar. Sorry, what am I looking at? Where's that phrase? Interesting. Oh, that's on the next verse. Interesting. Why did I do that? I don't know. Sometimes I make mistakes. So what we're going to do is this is why we do this, because we can fix it right here. All right, great. So next verse says, right, there we go. That looks nice. Chapter 12, verse 15. Rak bechol avat nafshecha tizbach ve'achalta basar. You can only kill and eat meat within your gates. Kivirkat Hashem Elokecha asher natan lecha. As much as as much as you're blessed by Hashem, it gives you b'chol sharecha in all your gates. You can eat the pure and impure, reversed, right? The impure and the pure you can eat. Katzvi v'cha'ayal, like the deer and the gazelle, right? Like the gazelle and the deer, right? You can eat these. In other words, you don't have to be always pure. Kohen, yes. Truma, yes. Beit HaMikdash, yes. But outside, you can kill and eat meat. You can barbecue in Tzfat. You can barbecue in Ranana. Very soon, when Trump takes over Gaza, you can barbecue there. You can go anywhere you want in Israel and eat meat. That's not a problem in terms of this. And the meat does not need to be pure, because you don't need to be pure unless you're going to the Beit HaMikdash. And so that's one of the important comments here from Rashi. A person does not need to be spiritually pure to eat the meat of a blemished sacrifice. It's an important thing, right? If there is a sacrifice that was about to be given, and you find out later, if you find out it had a mum, it had some sort of injury, and was not fit to be a sacrifice, who eats it now? It's been slaughtered. We don't want to throw it away. So it can be eaten by anybody, even somebody who's not spiritually pure. Obviously not in a spiritually pure place, not in the Beit HaMikdash area. It's taken off Har Habayit. It's given and it's eaten elsewhere in Yerushalayim. And an important thing, obviously, what is this all referring to? An important concept. We are not, religiously anyway, vegetarian. Are there people who are religious who are vegetarian? Sure. Is that a problem? Not right now. No, not a problem halakhically. There have been great rabbis who have been vegetarians. Rav Kook was famously a vegetarian. but we are allowed to eat meat, as we see in the Shulchan Aruch, as we're going to see very soon. The most rabbis who have smicha learned about learned the Shulchan Aruch, the parts of the Shulchan Aruch that deal with mostly meat, believe it or not. So it would be foolish to say we're not allowed to eat meat, and yet these are the halachot, these are the laws that most rabbis know best, right? They know the laws of salting meat. We'll talk about that later. We know they know the laws of meat and milk, and what kind of combinations of those is a problem or not a problem. Excuse me, how to fix it, forbidden mixtures, not necessarily to do with meat, etc. One moment. Uh, okay. People are having trouble finding the class. Give me a moment. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Let's keep going. But eating meat doesn't mean you can just gorge yourself on it. And as the Call of the Torah of Eli Munk brings up, yeah, we're allowed to eat meat, but not stuffing ourselves with it. We've seen that earlier in Jewish history with kibbutz hatava, etc. That they did not do the right thing by eating too much meat. If an animal that was once fit to be an offering becomes unfit, it can only be eaten by people. What do you mean people? That's the Gemara says Bechorot 15a. It means not animals, because these people are able to then appreciate the purpose of human eating, which is to maintain and further us for our moral and spiritual calling. You can't just give this poor, this poor animal, once this blemished sacrifice to a to to I can put that here. Hold on a second. This is why we're doing this class, so I can edit the book in real time. Okay, there we go. Even so, despite the fact that we're allowed to eat blemished meat, that doesn't mean we can just do anything we want with it. We cannot feed it to animals, and hold on a second. We seem to be having difficulty getting in here. Why is this on? Oh gosh. Okay. Shoot. Why am I? I'm sorry. Give me one moment. People are having trouble getting into the link. I guess for some reason they're using an old link. Whew. Okay. Just a moment. Ruby, you used the 277 link, right? What link was it? From not from the recent email, right? From the last week's email.
Yes.
Okay, got it. All right. Sorry about that. All right, let's go weiter. Let's go a little bit further. Let's see what happens. Okay, chapter 12, verse 16. Um, Here's where we're going to get some important halachic concepts going on. Rak hadam lo techelu. Do not eat blood. Al haaretz tishpechenu kamayim. The blood has to be poured onto the ground like water. That's the verse. And we have to understand why or what it is, what's going on. So first of all, the commentaries tell us, Rashi tells us, that this isn't just blood for the kosher animals, the animal that you're going to uh, uh, apologize. Okay. Sorry. It's not just the kosher animals, even a blemished animal, even an animal that wasn't kosher for a sacrifice that you found out later. You slaughtered it, you thought it was perfectly good, then you put it on the altar to sacrifice it, and then you find out, oops, it's not good, it has some sort of defect, it's blemished somehow, it cannot be eaten, but or it has to be eaten by somebody who's impure outside the temple. We talked about that. But its blood still cannot be eaten. It's not about the blood being holy because it's part of the sacrifice and the sacrifice is holy. The blood cannot be eaten no matter what. That's an important thing. And so, besides that, and we'll talk a little more about that halachic concept later with Malicha and such. But just so you know, at this point, after an undomesticated animal or bird is slaughtered for eating, this is not a sacrifice. It's slaughtered for eating. Birds, by the way, are not slaughtered. And they're killed by something called malika, which we're not going to go into the gross details about that now. But you cannot do that at home. You can't try this at home, right? You can only do this. Only the Kohen could do this in the Beit Hamikdash proper. So after a bird is slaughtered for eating, not in the Beit Hamikdash, or an undomesticated animal, that's a chaya, right? So in other words, a deer, a gazelle, these kinds of kosher animals that cannot be brought as sacrifices, when they're slaughtered only for eating, that animal's blood must be covered. This is as opposed to a cow's blood that does not need to be covered. Sheep, ram, those kinds of animals that are brought on the Beit Hamikdash and brought on the altar, that blood does not need to be covered. Only these birds and animals' blood need to be covered. But this is not true for the blood of domesticated animals. The Kohanim can only eat these in sanctified places to show that even the sensual eating becomes one of the acts directed to the sanctuary of the Torah. In other words, the eating also leads to God's closeness and is an act of divine service. That's from Rav Hirsch. So again, the whole point is their eating is holy. I think that's what we're getting over and over again. So far, these last 5-6 psukim that we've had, they all point to the same direction. The eating is a holy thing. It's a ceremony almost. The process of eating can and should be a ceremony. It was in the time of the Beit Hamikdash, and it was for Kohanim, but it was also for not Kohanim, as we've seen. So let's go on a few psukim later. Chapter 12, verse 18 says, Ki im lifnei Hashem elokecha tochlena. Eat them before Hashem, b'makom asher yivchar Hashem elokecha bo, to the place that Hashem has chosen. Again, that same phrase for the Beit Hamikdash, for the reasons we discussed earlier. Ata uvincha uvitecha, you and your son and your daughter, v'avdecha ve'amatecha, your male servant, your female servant, v'halevi asher b'sharecha, and for the Levi who's in your gates, v'samachta, and you shall be happy, rejoice, lifnei Hashem elokecha, b'chol mishlach yadcha, with all that is in your hand. Now, what is this Levi celebrating with you? How does this Levi get schlepped in with your family and your your servants? What does the Levi have to do with it? You have to like pull the Levi into your house. What's going on? So the answer is that there is and the Rashi brings this down, that you're supposed to give your tithes, your maaser, to the Levi. Now, if you don't have money to give, and not everybody does, if you don't have money to give to the Levi, what should you do? So Rashi says you can invite him into your house, and he can have some of your peace offering that we just talked about, the shlomim that this verse is talking about. That shlomim can be fed to the Kohen, to the Levi, and that could be your maser obligation being fulfilled through what? Through food. Again, food has that kind of power. You can't say, "Oh, I'll pay for your gas money. I'll give you a gift card to the Men's Warehouse or whatever." You can only fulfill your obligation of maser with actual money, maser, or food. Food is that holy. Food is that special that you can do that. All right. We go a little bit further, two more verses down to chapter 12, verse 20. And I just want to point out, for those of you who are just joining us now, that there are this Parsha has a lot to do with many of the laws of kosher food, what species are kosher, etc., and we'll get to that. But we're not even close to that yet. We're only in the beginning of the Parsha, and already we've had 6, 7 verses about food. There's a lot to talk about food in this parsha. It's just an amazing thing. We'll continue with this next verse again. Ki yarchiv Hashem elokecha et gvulcha. Hashem will enlarge your border. That's a promise that Israel will become bigger one day. Kasher diber lach, as he told you, as he promised you. V'amarta ochla basar, and you shall say, I will eat meat. You might say, I want to make a barbecue. And that's okay. As much as your soul wants, eat meat. No problem. As much as your soul wants, tochal basar, eat meat. Go ahead. Not a problem. Second. This is why we do this. Good. All right. So number one, the Jews were only allowed to. First of all, this might be something you don't know yet. The Ramban tells us that the Jews were actually not allowed to eat meat from the sacrifices until after they conquered Eretz Israel. Only at that point were they allowed to eat meat. One should only desire to eat meat occasionally, and this is according to the Malbim on a previous verse, and we said this before in other contexts as well. For example, when one is wealthy, right? Rashi says if you have money, you can enjoy meat. It's considered a luxury item, not a necessity, and so you shouldn't be like starving for meat. I just saw. I'm not going to say it's possibly lashon hara, if you know, but people are a little obsessed with meat nowadays. It's a luxury item. It's not a necessity. It is something it gives us protein, very important, but in measure. There's an amount that people should have. And again, if they're vegetarian, they have to get their protein from some other source, and probably eat a lot more of those other foods, lima beans or whatever, and that's okay. Okay. It is one thing to say one wants to eat meat. That's fine. It is something else entirely to cry for it, and that was considered lowly behavior of the Jews in Kivrot Hatava, says the Oznaim LaTorah, for which, again, Moshe is criticizing the Jews. Wanting to eat meat is still better than developing cravings for forbidden things, as the Jews did in Kivrot Hatava, right? If eating meat is going to calm your yetzer hara for other bad things, go ahead. You're replacing, your desire for something bad with something that's at least, providing you protein. That's already better. I remember, many years ago, I was visiting a friend who was it was basically in a place where he was trying to kick a few habits. And I noticed that when I was meeting him, although he was, he'd gone cold turkey with some of those habits, he was still, he was smoking much more than I'd ever seen him smoke. Everybody there was smoking, and that's what he told me. He told me that this kind of behavior, it's not healthy, but it's much healthier than the other things that he was doing and that the other people that were there were doing. So that's one of the ways that addicts can break a habit, is by focusing the energies to something else. And meat is one of the things that you can maybe focus your energy on. That it's at least, there's kosher meat. You can eat it in a healthy way. You can eat a healthy amount, obviously. But if that helps you kick a habit, then go ahead. Is basically what the Znaim Torah is saying. And wanting to eat meat is still better than developing cravings for forbidden items. As we just said, Jews are only allowed to eat meat because we are assumed to have weak constitutions and thus would otherwise engage in unnatural lusts, I think this is Rav Hirsch. Yeah, Rav Hirsch says this. That's the only reason we're even allowed to eat meat to begin with. All right, so now we're going to get to some halakhic concepts. Next verse, chapter 12, verse 21. You're supposed to bring your stuff to the Beit HaMikdash. Now, what if it's too far away? This place that Hashem will choose to place his name, that phrase that we're going to have over and over again as promised. Second, I'm sorry. There we go. This is why we do this. All right. Kasher tziviticha. You're going to bring your zevach, your sacrifices, your firstborn animals, vitzoncha, and of your flock, of your herds, and you're going to bring it to Hashem. Kasher tziviticha, as I commanded. Ve'achalta bisharecha. You're going to have to be, if it's too far for you, you might have to eat them within your gates. B'chol avat nafshecha, as much as your soul desires. According to the Gemara, I believe this is in Chulin 27, these words in this verse are the source for the mitzvah that we have, the rabbinic mitzvah of slaughtering animals, shchita. The requirement to perform shchita at the neck of the animal one wants to eat is derived from the word vizavachta, slaughter, while the obligation to slaughter fowl, in other words, birds, one wants to eat, is derived from the phrase ka'asher tziviticha, as I commanded you. So those are the words in this verse. The basic rules of kosher slaughter, as handed down by the oral law, are that the animal must be right? The basic laws, right? The basic rules are that the animal must be slaughtered with a cut across the windpipe and esophagus. We're going to get a little detailed here. I apologize. I should have given a trigger warning. Across the windpipe and esophagus by a Jewish person with a movable cutting instrument without interruption and without pressure or ripping, without any kind of tear. The only difference between an animal and a bird in this regard is that the cutting of either the windpipe or esophagus of the bird is sufficient to be kosher to eat. In other words, the bird has an esophagus, has a windpipe, has these two pipes. Only one of them needs to be cut. Either one, doesn't matter which one. One of them has to be cut. For an animal, both of them needs to be cut. Good. Symbolically, what does all this mean? Why? What is the windpipe? What is the esophagus? What does that have to do with me eating this animal? I don't care if it breathes. I don't care if it ate. What do I care what goes down its esophagus? So says Rav Hirsch, beautiful thing. Symbolically, these actions remove the animal from the activities of life, breathing and eating. By performing this removal in the uniquely human manner of cutting, no animal cuts, right? We cut with a knife, with a moving object, right? instead of tearing, which other animals do indeed perform, we're indicating that the animal power is assimilated into us through subservience to free will. As we're the only people, we're the only people. People are the only things that have free will. Okay, animals don't. Animals just do what their instinct tells them to do. Even when they save a person from a burning house, it's not because they love the person; it's because they know that person is going to feed them. That's they rely on their pack, and that person is in their pack, as opposed to maybe a cat who will just leave the person burning in the house, right? So, because they don't really rely on us anyway. So, that's the idea. Human being has free will, and that free will is what's taking, and that human ability to cut is taking that life out of that animal so that it can be absorbed into us. We're going to eat it. That protein is going to go into our bloodstream, all because of what we did to it, because we have the ability to do that. That's on a symbolic level. Next verse, I think it's the very next verse, if I'm not mistaken. No, 2 verses down. Sorry. Rak chazak, but be strong. Why you have to be so strong? Levilti echol hadam, to make sure you don't eat blood. I have to be strong not to eat blood. Trust me, there are other averot that I should be strong about. Stronger than blood. What's the deal with blood? Hu hanefesh. It's the life. Lo tochal hanefesh im habasar. Do not eat the life with the meat. Okay? So, say the commentaries. Let's start with Rashi here, quoting the Gemara in Pesachim, Sanhedrin, Chulin, right? He's basically saying that we are strictly forbidden from eating blood, and specifically the blood of a live animal. De'araita, on the Torah level, there is blood that we could possibly eat. The rabbis restricted all blood to avoid us possibly eating the blood we're not allowed to eat on the Torah level. What blood are we not allowed to eat on the Torah level? Specifically, the blood, life blood. In other words, either the blood of a currently living animal or the blood that spurts out, I'm sorry to be graphic again, trigger warning, the blood that spurts out at the slaughter from the neck. That's called the lifeblood. This is a lesson that if even abstaining from a sin that is not appealing gives great reward, how much greater is the reward for abstaining from a sin for which one has a passion? This is a famous Rashi from the Gemara in Makot 23b. The idea is, be strong, don't eat blood. If you're going to be strong and don't eat blood, which you don't want to do anyway, so all the more so, kal v'chomer, al achat kama v'kama, you should be even stronger to avoid those things you want to do. Rob a bank. I don't know. Eat a cheeseburger. I don't know what your personal desires are. None of my business. But whatever it is that you personally desire that you know is an avera, if you have to be strong to avoid something you don't want to do, which is eat blood, so how much more so this? That's Rashi. That's not the only opinion, though, about why you should be strong. The Ramban says the verse also tells us to be strong to avoid this because we need to have strong convictions that idolatrous blood rituals will not help us. People then thought that eating blood, and by the way, in some ways people still believe this, eating blood will help them somehow get closer to their gods. There are people, I'll tell you, again, trigger warning, this is a little bit gross, but there are warlords in Africa today, 2025, who make it a point to try to find the leader of their enemies group and the other warlord, and to kill them and to drink their blood, to bite out of their heart. It's like they have this idea that they're going to, attain that person's strength by doing that. So this kind of avodah zarah kind of philosophy is not new, and people had it back then. And the Ramban says that's why you should be strong. You should avoid this because this is something people were doing. The Sforno adds, even if such rituals had the ability to summon powerful demons, people believed that it did, and according to Sforno, maybe it did. Maybe it can do that. Maybe it can have some sort of power, drinking somebody's blood or drinking something's blood. Maybe you can become magically something and become rich and famous and whatever else you dream of becoming. Says Sforno, even nevertheless, be strong. That's what it means to be strong. You fight against that Yetzer, even though it might seem like a good idea. And now it's time for some halacha. Okay. In order to prevent Jews from accidentally eating blood, that's the Torah level, the rabbis established the laws of melicha, or salting. You might have heard about this before. Now, melicha, salting, is one of the concepts that's learned by people studying for smicha, but should be known by everybody. It used to be 100 years ago or even less, almost every Yiddish balabusta knew how to salt meat, right? You got the meat after it was slaughtered, and you had to the chicken after it was slaughtered, and you had to take it from the butcher shop where you just cut off the head. You have to take the animal, defeather it, and salt it, and you have to know what you were doing. Nowadays, hardly anybody does it, but rabbis still have to learn this for their smicha, the laws of melicha, of salting. So just a quick summary. This is not at all the entire inyan, the whole concept. In the Shulchan Aruch, it goes, what did I put down? It goes from in Yeridea, chapter 69 through 78, so 9 whole chapters of very detailed stuff. It takes months to learn. Anyway, so the basics are: we first remove all large arteries and veins, as well as any bruises and coagulated blood. Then the meat is koshered, a process of soaking, salting, and rinsing the meat to soften it to draw out all the blood. A flat, large grained salt called kosher salt, that's why it's called kosher salt, it's because it's flat and will lay smoothly on the meat, is used for this process. If this procedure is not performed soon after the slaughter, the blood is considered to have settled in the meat, and the meat is no longer considered kosher to eat unless it is prepared through broiling or roasting with sufficient drainage. So yeah, you can barbecue the meat even without salting it. And some people say it tastes better that way. But again, when you do that, you need to make sure that there's room for, and it's pretty easy to do on a grate, because that's how you barbecue. But there has to be room for the blood in the meat to drip out while it's cooking. Okay. Some people do that on purpose because they don't want their meat to be too salty in the cooking. So a lot of people don't know. I mean, we don't really think about it too much. I worked in a kosher kitchen with a non-Jewish chef for a while, in one of my whiles, and he mentioned that people like the kosher chicken more than the non-kosher chicken. He couldn't figure out why, and I told him maybe it's because the kosher chicken is salted, right? It has more flavor in it to begin with before it's even cooked. Now, obviously, you shouldn't try it when it's not cooked. That's very dangerous. Don't try this at home. Raw chicken is not healthy, but that could have something to do with why it tastes better than non-kosher chicken to begin with. And so what do you do with this blood? Says chapter 12, still chapter 12, verse 24. Lo tuchlenu, do not eat it. Al ha'aretz tishpechenu kamayim, pour it onto the earth like water. We had a verse like this before, by the way, but here it's in regard to actually eating it. In other words, not eating it, and to make sure that you pour it onto the ground. We are forbidden from eating blood that drips out of an animal after it is slaughtered. That's Rashi. And one of the reasons that liver is permitted, just on those of you who've eaten liver before, liver is filled with blood. That's all it is. It's like one big, trigger alert. It's one big bag of blood, basically. Right? So it's why it's so healthy to eat, as we talked about last week's Parsha. One of the reasons that liver is permitted to be eaten is because the blood inside it is hardened and would not drip out. It's not that blood that would drip out as during the slaughter. The different kind of doesn't move around as they say. But it's still, there is liver still needs to be koshered on the rabbinic level. There's a way to do it on a slant, with a drainage. There's a way to do it. It's not easy to do. If you ever buy raw liver, let me know, and I can try to walk you through it. Although I've never actually done this myself. Okay, next verse. Rak kachacha asher yiyu lecha, only holy things will you have. Nidaracha tisavata, your vows, you shall take them. El hamakom asher yivchar Hashem, to the place that Hashem chose. Again, that phrase, as previously stated. Although slaughtered is in a proper manner, we are forbidden from eating a slaughtered holy offering outside the temple. We spoke about that before. Again, a concept of eating. Eating has to be sometimes in the right place and at the right time. That's from Rashi. Chapter 12, verse 27. Next verse. You can offer your burnt offerings, the flesh and the blood, al mizbach Hashem Elokecha, on the altar of Hashem your God. V'dam zvachecha yishafech al mizbach Hashem Elokecha, the blood of your offering you are going to pour on the mizbeach, on the altar of Hashem. There's a proper procedure to do that. V'habasar tuchel, and you're going to eat the meat. Since the verse creates a hekesh, a parallel between the blood and the meat, right? There's something you're going to do to the blood. You don't do that with the meat. You do, so because there's a comparison, what's called in halacha a hekesh, a parallel between the blood and the meat. Meat is to be thrown onto the altar just as blood of an olah is thrown onto the sides of the altar. The blood is sprinkled. It can't be just like poured. It has to be sprinkled. The meat also isn't supposed to be gently placed. There you go. It has to be thrown onto the altar, tossed. The sages list 4 rules regarding, based on that. And this is the Gemara in Zvachim 62b tells us this. So because of this, the rabbis came up with 4 rules about treating bread with respect. One, and we'll see how this connects to what we just said. Number 1, one may not put raw meat on bread. Number 2, one may not transfer a full cup of wine over the bread. So if you have a full cup of wine, you shouldn't pass it over bread. You shouldn't throw bread or support a dish with a piece of bread. And should it fall, one should not allow bread to remain on the ground. You're supposed to pick up bread. There's a lot of other rules about bread. You're not supposed to step on it, etc. But that's all of these are related. So now, based on what we just said about bread, although a person should be careful to treat food with respect and not throw it, especially bread, some have a custom. There's a custom mentioned in the Taam Sofer. Some have a custom at meals to throw the challah that they cut to family and guests in homage to the throwing of the meat in the Beit HaMikdash. Right? We have to throw the bread, throw the meat. So maybe we're throwing the bread at our table to people in a respectful way. So what do we do? So do we throw bread? Do we not throw bread? So it might be different. This is even a custom. There is even a custom to leave bread on the table during Birkat Hamazon to signify that there's an abundance of food from Hashem and having enough to leave some over. And because blessing is need an object to take hold, there's 2 different reasons why we leave bread on the table. when we bench, when we say Birkat Hamazon. One reason is to show Hashem, look, we have plenty. We have so much that we have even leftovers when we're already all done. As we said in last week's Parsha. Now we've satisfied, we've eaten, and now we're going to bless. And we even have food left over on the table. We didn't have to eat everything. We have to eat every single last bit. We can show that we have some left over. And this is, by the way, true even if you don't have guests. Even if you're eating alone, you should leave some food over. There's a certain way to throw out the bread. You're not supposed to just throw it in the trash by itself. You're supposed to wrap it separately and throw it out like that. But you are supposed to leave some over for that reason and another reason. So that reason was brought by I guess the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch brings that another reason to do this is because to show that whenever you make a blessing, you need an object. You need an object for that blessing to take hold. So you're blessing what? You're blessing you're thanking Hashem for the food you have in front of you. It makes it that visceral experience of having something in front of you when you make the blessing is much more powerful, which is why, by the way, we'll get to it, God willing, when we get to Sefer Bereshit, as I said, in a few months. But that's one of the reasons why Yitzchak asked Esav to bring him food before he gave him his blessings, because he needed some sort of object to be that conduit for that blessing to work. And that's true in a lot of ways. Okay. Next verse, just one short comment, but it's very important. It's really on just the first two words. We're talking about eating. We're talking about we're about to get the laws of kosher food and non-kosher food, etc. Shamor v'shamata. Shamor, guard, observe, and listen to what I'm saying. What's the guarding? So Rashi says and this should be on a bumper sticker. One cannot properly perform the laws of kosher eating without constant study. You need to know what kosher is and what it's not, or you're not keeping kosher. I've seen, and try to avoid any kind of big machloket, I have seen rabbis in other communities who've made the simplest mistakes, just not knowing some basic laws of kosher, about koshering, about taking things to a mikvah. It's not just for your house; it's for a kitchen too, if it's owned by a Jew. So there's you constantly have to study and review. That's probably the reason why, of all the laws that there are in Judaism, kosher, Shabbat, Nida, Yom Tov, Tzedakah, the only category of law that somebody needs to study to get smicha to become a rabbi is kosher. Of all the things, there's so many concepts in there, so many little nooks and crannies, so many details you need to constantly study in order to do it right. The next verse that has something to do with food doesn't seem like it has anything to do with food. The next concept in the Torah has to do with avodah zarah, and there's concepts of if somebody tries to seduce you into committing avodah zarah, or a whole town becomes people who worship avodah zarah. So it says here, Ki yisidcha achicha ben imecha. If your brother, the son of your mother, or bincha, or your son, or bitcha, or your daughter, or eshet chekecha, or your wife, or reyecha, your friend, asher ben kanavshecha, or your closest friend, b'seitelem, or comes to you up secretly and says, Ne'elcha, come with me. Nevde Elohim achirim, we're going to worship other gods. Asher lo yadata atao v'avotecha. Gods you didn't know and your father didn't know. So that person needs to be punished. That person can be killed. What does that have to do with food? I'm glad you asked. So the comment here from Rashi. Is it Rashi? It's the Gemara in Chulin, and then Rashi there says, one who convinces others to worship idols does so by enticing the audience with food and drink, since that is the most powerful way to appeal to a person's heart. The way to a man's heart is through his stomach, says the Gemara. You want to convince somebody to worship Avodah Zarah? Give him a good meal. Invite him to a not kosher meal and see what happens. This is exactly what Achashverosh tried to do in the beginning of the Purim story. The whole first chapter of Megillat Esther has nothing to do with Esther, has nothing to do with Haman, has nothing to do with the entire Purim story at all, except for Achashverosh and the party. And the rabbis have to bend over backwards to figure out what does the party have to do with the Purim story. Chapter 3 is where we hear about Mordechai. The whole Esther and finding a new wife and all that. All of that happens in later chapters. The first chapter, what does that have to do with anything? Do you even have to hear that to be Yotzi the mitzvah of hearing Megillah on Purim? The answer is yes. Because it does have something to do with the story. Because that's how Achashverosh tried to appeal to the Jewish people, to get them to sin, for them to no longer be worthy of earning the second Beit HaMikdash, which he was almost successful in doing. Chapter 14. We're a little bit over time, but we started a little bit late, so it's okay. Chapter 14 is one of the chapters in the Torah that literally lists species of kosher and non-kosher animals. So it's worth at least a little bit of review, especially in a book like this, in a class like this about kosher and food. So first of all, chapter 14, verse 3 says, Lo tochal kol to'eva. Don't eat anything disgusting. Well, that's specific, right? I mean, we're going to have a list. Is this like in the introduction to this list of what's a to'eva, of what's disgusting? So a couple of things to say here. First of all, the Torah mentions the laws of kosher after idolatry because eating forbidden foods makes one's heart unreceptive to Torah. I have actually seen this in my own life. I've seen this in many cases. People who do not eat kosher, or even if they transgressed a little bit by accident and weren't very careful about kosher, they have a harder time learning and remembering Torah. What I've told people before is if you have trouble learning Torah, first thing you want to do is check your cupboard. See what's on your shelf. Because that might have something to do with it. That's the Gemara. Sorry, the Oznaim Torah brings that down. This verse also teaches that all non-kosher foods combine with one another, even if they are not min b'mina. This is a halachic concept. In other words, of the same type. So if you are not allowed to eat a half a kazayit, right? You're not allowed to eat a kazayit, right? Well, we talk about food sizes, as we talked about in last week's Parsha. We talked about this concept of a kazayit, of 1.1 ounces. That's what's considered eating. Anything less than that is not considered eating. Now, let's say you have in your possession a half a pound of pig meat. Sorry, not half a pound, half an ounce of pig meat. And you have another 0.6 ounces of something else not kosher, shrimp. Can you eat both of them together? Or if you eat them together, can you say, I didn't really eat 1.1 ounces of non-kosher pig. I didn't eat 1.1 ounces of shrimp. I ate just 1.1 ounces of non-kosher food. The answer is that's also a problem. You get the punishment for eating non-kosher even for that, because because that also counts. Anything not kosher to eat can be considered disgusting, says the Gemara in Chulin. And that's why it says that. So it is kind of like an introduction to this concept. The reason for this is that such foods are not compatible with our pure souls, as we just said, and can negatively impact our character. Who says these things? So the Ramban and the Sforno, being spiritually poisonous, it should repulse a person, even when its status is in doubt, just as a person would categorically reject food labeled possibly poisonous. If you had a label, the Ramchal says, on a food that says possibly poisonous, what would you do? Give it a try? It's probably okay. No, you wouldn't eat it. So the same thing is, if there's any doubt about something, if it's kosher or not, stay away. This verse, by the way, permits the eating of a fetus living inside its kosher mother, obviously once it grows up and becomes edible, right? But not any other creature living inside it, which would be considered a disgusting thing. Maybe in future classes we can go back to this, but chapter 14, verse 9 talks about what animals, what birds are, what fish are kosher, only those with fins and scales. Verse 20 talks about other winged things that are kosher, including grasshoppers, some grasshoppers where there's a custom to eat them. And there's a tradition which ones are kosher, which ones aren't. And then the rest of chapter 14 deals with more rules about food. And we did not get to it. I kind of expected that we wouldn't, but chapter 14, 15, and 16 deal with holidays, and there's stuff to talk about there in terms of food. Obviously, you need to eat during the holidays. That's part of the mitzvah of v'samachta b'chagecha, to enjoy, to rejoice on your holiday. Implies eating, and not just eating anything, eating meat, drinking wine, those sorts of things. And we'll, God willing, in future classes, we'll be able to, Hadron Alach, we'll be able to go back to this and see more. And God willing, we'll in the process of learning these laws and learning the Parsha, learning the Torah, we'll be able to do that thing that Rashi said, shamor, to guard and be chazak, to be strong and be able to fulfill all the mitzvot, especially all those that relate to food. And as we've seen, a lot of mitzvot relate to food. So thank you for listening. I'm going to stop the live feed to Facebook. And if you have any questions, now would be a great time to ask.